Okay, so at the end of the last section, we talked about how lower activation energies allow reactions to occur at a faster rate, meaning that reactants react faster to make products, meaning that the reactants disappear faster and the products appear faster. So we're going to talk about reaction rates in this video, and they're kind of there's a lot of things that affect reaction rates, but they're kind of three primary factors that affect reaction rate. One is the concentration of reactants, and concentration simply means the amount of reactant in a certain amount of volume, right? So higher concentrations means that there's more reactants in the volume. Lower concentration means there's less reactants in the volume. So let's say we're doing 1 liter, our reaction is 1 liter. Higher concentration would mean that there's more reactants in that 1 liter. Lower concentration means that there's less reactants in that 1 liter. Okay, so we'll talk about concentration. We'll talk about heat. Basically, heat is, if we introduce heat to the system, it causes the temperature to go up. So the temperature of the reactants is going to affect the rate of the reaction. And then we'll talk about catalysts and how catalysts work. And catalysts are molecules that are substances that increase the reaction rate, that speed up reactions. Okay. So let's talk about concentration. So we said that for reactions to occur, typically collisions have to happen. More collisions means more reactions. Okay, so if I need molecules to collide, I need the more molecules there are in a volume, the more they collide. So you can imagine if you take, a classroom, let's say a flat classroom, and put 2 people in there, and we tell them to walk in straight lines, and when they run into a wall, bounce off, and so on. As they're walking around, they aren't going to run into each other very often. The room's pretty big. There's only 2 of them. The chance of them running into each other is pretty low. Now, if I put 50 more people in there and tell them to do the same thing, I'm going to get quite a few people running into each other, assuming the room's not too big. That's the idea of concentration, because we need to have collisions. The more collisions that occur, the better the chance of a reaction occurring. So if we have more reactants in a given volume, we have more collisions, and therefore we have more reactions occurring, more products being formed. All right. So if we look at our graph here, so that means higher concentrations means faster reactions. All right. So we can see this graph over here, and initially I've got all my reactants. And as time goes on, you can see the curve go down, and the amount of reactants decreases because I'm making products, right? When a reaction occurs, I lose reactants and get products. So we can see initially it's all reactants, but as time goes on, some of the reactants convert to products. Initially, the slope is pretty steep, and that means the rate of the reaction is pretty high. But as I get less and less reactants, the reaction slows down a bit. Why does that happen? Well, again, the volume hasn't changed, but the amount of reactants has changed. And because we need collisions and the number of reactants has gone down, there's less collisions. So as a reaction progresses, it slows down. And it slows down because most reactions slow down because you have less reactants, less collisions, less chances of the production of products. Okay, so concentration is going to be a major player in most reactions and the reaction rate. Okay, the second thing is heat. We said that during collisions, a lot of times those collisions are what cause there to be enough activation energy, to overcome the activation energy. And if molecules are moving faster, they collide with more energy, more violently, and they have better chances of having those collisions have a better chance of having enough energy to overcome that energy barrier, the activation energy, and get to products. Okay, so as we heat things, the molecules move faster, they collide more, they collide with more energy, and we get more products faster. All right, and the typical rule of thumb is if I increase my temperature of my reactants by 10 degrees, the reaction rate doubles. So it doesn't take much, right? It doesn't take much heat to actually cause the reaction rate to increase. So as long as your reactants can handle that excess heat, adding heat lets the reaction go faster and get to products faster. Okay. Then again, if you remove heat from the system, it slows down. And sometimes you want that depending on what's going on. Okay. The last thing we want to talk about here is catalysts. And catalysts are simply molecules or substances that we put in the reaction to help the reaction go at a faster rate. Sometimes this is simply to get the reactants in the right orientation so they run into each other correctly. Sometimes this is to help overcome the energy barrier. Whatever it is, well, it's always to do that. Whatever it is, catalysts are put into a reaction to increase the rate of the reaction. And they do that by lowering the activation energy. Remember we said that reactions that have lower activation energy have faster reaction rates? So that's what a catalyst does. It simply lowers the activation energy so that more collisions result in more product. Okay? A catalyst is not a reactant. It doesn't get consumed during the reaction. The catalyst will still be there at the end of the reaction after all the reactants has gone to products. So typically what we do is when we write a reaction where we have a catalyst, you know the arrow that is from reactants to products, we write the name of the catalyst on the arrow. In this, I'm just going to put catalyst, but when we use a catalyst, we put whatever that catalyst on that arrow. Basically, that's showing it's neither a reactant or a product, but there is a catalyst in there to help the reaction go faster. In biological systems, catalysts are almost always used. The reason for that is we require a lot of reactions in cells, and we don't have necessarily a lot of reactants, right? So we don't have a lot of collisions. So in order to get the reactions to happen, we use catalysts. In biological systems, the typical catalysts are enzymes. And enzymes are these large molecules which are proteins, either a single protein or a collection of proteins that assist in the reaction. Again, catalysts, enzymes, they're not consumed in the reaction. So an enzyme can catalyze reaction after reaction after reaction after reaction. Okay. On the right here is this enzyme called lactase. Typically, enzymes are named after the reaction they catalyze. So, for example, lactase assists in the breakdown of lactose. Lactose is the sugar that's in milk. Okay. Enzymes are typically huge, and you can see this molecule is huge. And they're made of proteins, which ultimately are made of amino acids. So it's the amino acids that are put together that ultimately make the structure. So amino acids are pretty simple molecules, and they all have a unique side chain, but amino acids are pretty small. But when I bind them together, and depending on what the side chain is, those side chains will interact and be attracted to each other or repel each other, and that's what causes the large molecule to kind of fold and bend into shape. We can also see Like in here, there's these dots. Those dots are usually some sort of metal ion. And in a lot of enzymes, there are metal ions, and those metal ions help the enzyme fold and cause reactions to occur properly. All right, so the lactase, that enzyme on the right there, is used to help break down lactose to glucose and galactose, which is kind of the first step in the process, and then something else helps catalyze the breakdown of glucose and galactose, and so on. Okay, so in your body, in your cells, it's enzymes that are the catalysts, and your body has lots and lots and lots of enzymes that are used to do lots and lots of different reactions. Okay, so how much faster are reactions with enzymes? So enzymes tend to speed up reactions between 10 to the 5th, so 100,000 times faster, to 10 million times faster. Okay, so enzymes increase the rates of reactions a lot. And we need that because your cells need to continuously be doing reactions, and without the help of enzymes, everything would be really slow and you wouldn't exist. All right, so like I said, a lot of enzymes contain metal ions. Zinc and magnesium are pretty common. Iron's another one. We can see on the right here is the decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. It decomposes very, very, very slowly to water and oxygen, like very slowly, right? We have hydrogen peroxide. I've got hydrogen peroxide in my medicine cabinet that's been there for a couple of years. It's still most of it's hydrogen peroxide. So the reaction's really slow. However, so on the left here, we can see that liquid's just hydrogen peroxide, nothing in it. If the reaction was pretty quick, we'd be seeing bubbles because of the O2. O2 would be being produced, and O2 is a gas, so we'd see bubbles. But on normal timescales, just with H2O2, the decomposition is really slow. However, if we add a drop of blood, this drop falls right into the liquid. We can see all those white things on the right there, those are all bubbles. We can see that the reaction occurs really, really fast now. The conversion between hydrogen peroxide and water and oxygen occurs really fast. We just put a little drop in, and bubbles, and millions and millions of bubbles form. Okay, there is some enzyme in blood that catalyzes this reaction. I don't know what it is, but there is. Right? So, catalysts increase reaction rates, and in biological systems, those catalysts are typically enzymes.